Hey everyone, hope you're doing all right. Uh, for this week's assignment, I'm going to have you do a couple activities in Desmos called Marblesides, and I wanted to give you sort of a little introduction to how Marblesides works so that you know what you're supposed to do for these assignments. So I'm going to look at this first one, which is the Marblesides lines, and you notice the first slide here says, let's marble slide. And you see in the top right how we've got this little launch button. Really all there is to do on this slide is to click the launch button and see what happens. So you click the launch button and you notice that these little purple balls fall and they go through and collect the 4 stars. So that's the basics of how this Marblesides game is going to work. Really there's nothing for us to do here on this first slide other than click the launch button. So we can move on to the next one. So this is Fix It 1, which is our first actual marble slide that we're going to try. And what happens when we click the launch button right away? Well, if you click the launch button, you notice that the line on this graph stops the balls from falling, and they're sort of too high to collect all those stars and beat the game. And you notice the directions here say change one number in the row below to fix the Marblesides. So what I'd like you to do is to pause this video for a minute and try it out. Change this number here, change this 1/2, change this number 1, see what happens when you change both those numbers, and see if you can get it to actually collect the stars when the balls drop. Go ahead, pause the video now and play around with it. Okay. Hopefully if you're still watching at this point, you've gotten a chance to play with this. You probably noticed that changing this 1/2, this 1/2 is the m in the mx plus b, changes our slope of this line. If I change this to something like 2, oh, it makes the line steeper, which isn't really what I want to do because now my balls fall and they don't collect the stars. I don't want to actually change the slope of this line. What I want to do is slide it up or down. Well, the number that can do that is the intercept. You notice that this intercept here is at 0, 1, and I notice that this line is about 1, 2, 3 units too high. So 1 minus 3 gives me -2. If I change this 1 to a -2, that slides the line down so that now it's aligned with all these stars. And that's what you needed to do for Fix It 1. This third slide here is just letting you know how to use the reset button in the Marblesides. So if you get carried away and do too much, there's a little gear that you can click, and clicking on the gear and then the reset button will change it back to whatever the original is. So if I go back to my Fix It 1 here, I can click the gear and click the reset, and it goes back to how it was originally before I played with it. But let's move along to Fix It number 2. So again, notice the directions say change one number in the row to fix the Marblesides. And what I would advise you to do is to pause this video for a minute and play around with it. Go ahead, I'll wait. Okay. Unlike last time where you wanted to slide it up or slide it down, we don't really want to do that. Changing that 3 to a -3, it's moving the graph down, but even if I move the graph down like a whole lot, it's still not going to collect all those stars. So rather than do that, let's reset it back to my original here. I don't want to actually change the intercept this time. I want to change the slope. So let's change the slope to something like 1. Well, that gets better, but it's still not slanted enough to collect all the stars. Well, what's less than 1? Well, what if I try 0? If I try a slope of 0, now I've got a horizontal line. Well, that's too little. And what we want is somewhere between a slope of 1 and a slope of 0. So try a number between 1 and 0, like 1/2. Now I've got the perfect slope to collect all those marbles. And that's the idea behind Fix It number 2. The next couple slides here, this is Fix It number 3. And you notice something that they've added here to Fix It number 3. See these little curly braces here? These are Desmos' way of limiting the domain of a function. So if you remember from our lesson on functions and domain, The domain tells you the valid x values for this function. So you notice how this inequality here says x less than 4? Well, if you notice how on this graph, the only parts of this line that are being shown are the ones that are less than 4. So on fix-it number 3, what I'd like you to do is pause this video for a minute and play around with this number 4 here and see if you can find a value of 4, or a value that will go here that can change this line so that it collects all the stars here. Because if right now, if we hit this, it doesn't quite get those last two. So pause the video now, play around with that 4, and see if you can get a number that will match up with all the stars. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to play with it. We want this to be longer, right? So I definitely don't want to shorten this. If I change this to 0, that obviously makes it worse, right? So I want a bigger value than 4. And you notice that this star over here is about 7 or 8. So let's try something like 8. Well, if I go to 8, I kind of overshoot that last star. You notice that these balls have a little gravity to them. So what I'm going to do is change this to something like 7. And if I do 7, you notice that it starts falling a little bit earlier, and that's enough to catch all the balls. Hopefully by now you have an idea of how these marble slides work. And fix-it number 4 asks you to add an additional equation. So for this marble slides, you're not just going to need, you might not just need to modify this one. You might also need to add a second line here. So some other y equals 1/2 x, maybe, as an idea. Some of these will require multiple lines to solve them. So try fix-it number 4, try adding another line to this, and you might have to modify this one. And the goal of this marble slides is just for you to play around with the numbers to get an idea of what changing these numbers does to the graphs. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how to complete this assignment. The other marble slides is based on parabolas. So I'm not going to go through that as detailed as I did this one, but I do want to show you this basic equation of a parabola. The general idea of a parabola, you might often see it written in this form. We call this the vertex form of a parabola. And this number outside the parentheses, a, controls the scale factor of this parabola. So changing this a outside the parentheses will stretch or shrink or flip the parabola. Changing the number inside the parentheses is going to slide the parabola left or right. And changing the number that you add outside the parentheses will slide the parabola up or down. So when you're doing the parabola marble slides, again, I want you to play around with the numbers a lot and see what they do. But that's the basic idea here. You control the scale factor, the horizontal translation, and the vertical translation by changing the 3 numbers in an equation of this form. I hope that helps with those assignments, and have a great week. I look forward to our art projects that we're going to be working on. Take care.